previous video, we examined the physical power of a Primarch without armor, but that was only the foundation of what they were capable of. In this video, we are going to explore how much stronger a Primarch becomes after putting on a suit of power armor and carrying weapons designed specifically for them. After that, we will place a fully equipped Primarch against the military forces of modern Earth and ask one question: could we actually stop them? First, let us begin with the armor. A Primarch's power armor is not simply a layer of metal wrapped around the body. Beneath the armored plates are artificial muscles and powered systems that move together with every motion of the wearer. The armor does not replace the Primarch's natural strength. It amplifies that strength and raises it to an entirely new level. The lore does not provide a universal multiplier, but for this analysis, a reasonable estimate is that Primarch-grade power armor could raise the wearer's total physical strength to roughly 200 to 250% of their unarmored level, depending on the Primarch and the armor itself. Even without armor, an average Primarch could already lift, overturn, or throw vehicles weighing many tens of tons, while the physically strongest among them could perform far greater feats under extreme conditions. Once equipped with Primarch-grade power armor, a modern main battle tank weighing between 50 and 70 tons would fall within the range of objects they could physically overpower. Under favorable conditions, a Primarch could lift one side, drag it across the ground, overturn it, or even raise and hurl it aside. With that level of power, they could tear open blast-resistant doors, rip massive components out of heavy machinery, and dismantle armored vehicles using brute force alone. And they would not need to lift an entire tank cleanly above their head to destroy it, breaking its tracks, bending the cannon, crushing the engine compartment, or ripping open the turret would reduce it to a useless mass of metal within moments. Their raw destructive strength would make ordinary urban obstacles almost meaningless. Walls, doors, and most buildings could be broken through with little difficulty. Only heavily reinforced bunkers or vaults protected by massive steel doors and thick reinforced concrete would significantly slow a Primarch down. Even then, such structures would merely delay them rather than truly stop them. This gives a Primarch terrifying mobility. However, the greatest advantage of power armor is not the additional strength. It is the protection. A fully equipped Primarch would effectively possess 3 major layers of defense, and an attack would need to overcome all 3 before it could truly bring them down. The first layer would be the personal energy field surrounding the armor. This field would absorb, deflect, or disperse much of the energy and momentum of an incoming attack before it ever touched the physical plates. Pistols, assault rifles, infantry machine guns, and most armor-piercing rifle rounds would therefore accomplish little more than gradually draining the field. Even heavier weapons would need repeated impacts in rapid succession to overload the field before the Primarch could escape, reposition, or retaliate. The second layer would be the power armor itself. Once the energy field weakened or collapsed, the attackers would still have to penetrate thick plates made from materials far beyond modern military steel, supported by reinforced internal structures and protective layers beneath them. Anti-material rifles and heavy machine guns might destroy sensors, damage joints, or break exposed components, but they would still struggle against the main armor plates. Sustained autocannon fire, tank rounds, or anti-tank missiles would be far more dangerous, especially if several attacks repeatedly struck the same weakened section. But even penetrating the armor would not necessarily stop the Primarch. The third and final layer would be the Primarch's own body. Their immense muscle mass, reinforced skeleton, unusual internal biology, resistance to shock, and extraordinary ability to remain functional after severe trauma would allow them to survive wounds that would instantly kill an ordinary human. A projectile might pass through the field and armor, enter the body, and still fail to damage anything vital enough to end the fight. To truly bring the Primarch down, the attackers would need to breach the energy field, penetrate the armor, and then inflict catastrophic damage on the head, spine, or vital organs before the Primarch could escape, retaliate, or recover. That would likely require several direct hits from heavy weapons, sustained attacks focused on one area, or a perfectly placed strike from an extremely powerful weapon. and completing all 3 stages would be extraordinarily difficult against a target with the speed, reflexes, battlefield awareness, and intelligence of a Primarch. Power Armor would also make the already extraordinary endurance of a Primarch even more frightening. A Primarch might be able to fight at extremely high intensity for 2 or 3 days continuously. If the level of activity changed between combat, movement, hiding, and ambushes, they could remain operational for much longer. The armor regulates temperature, filters the air, monitors the wearer's physical condition, injects stimulants when necessary, and provides life support. Its power supply does not function like an ordinary battery that must be recharged every day. It is designed to remain operational for an extremely long time. The resources that would need to be replaced more frequently are food, water, medicine. However, even food and water would not be serious weaknesses in the short term. A Primarch could hunt animals, locate natural water sources, or take supplies from warehouses and transportation networks. Ordinary steel doors, fences, and security systems would not be enough to keep them out. For that reason, attempting to starve a Primarch would be almost impossible during the early stages of the conflict. When it comes to weapons, a Primarch's firearms would possess terrifying destructive power, but ammunition would still be a limitation. Bolters, plasma weapons, and Primarch-sized energy weapons could destroy infantry, vehicles, and defensive positions from a distance. But after hundreds or thousands of shots, their ammunition and fuel would eventually run out. Modern Earth would also be almost completely unable to quickly manufacture compatible ammunition using Imperial technology. Therefore, looting modern armories would not replenish ammunition or fuel for ranged weapons either. Melee weapons, however, would be a different story. Power swords, power axes, power fists, and thunder hammers do not rely only on physical strength. They generate energy fields that disrupt or weaken matter at the point of contact. When that technology is combined with the strength of an armored Primarch, every strike becomes a devastating anti-armor attack. Against weapons of this level, metal plates might as well be made of butter. They could be sliced through or smashed apart, and almost no material currently used on Earth would be capable of resisting repeated direct strikes. Once the Primarch reached close range, the vehicle would have very little ability to defend itself. Inside a city, these weapons could also break open bunker doors, create paths through walls, destroy power stations, damage communication systems, and ignite fuel storage facility. A Primarch could not cut a skyscraper in half with a single swing, but they could destroy critical structural or mechanical components and cause an entire building or infrastructure network to stop functioning. Melee weapons would not last forever either. Their energy generators could fail, their blades could break, and the motors inside chain weapons could eventually be destroyed. However, when used against the technology of modern Earth, weapons designed to fight space marines, alien monsters, and war machines from the far future could remain functional for an extremely long time. They would also be much more sustainable than ranged weapons. Ammunition would eventually run out, but a power weapon could be used again and again. That may be one reason why Primarchs and their sons are so fond of close combat, or maybe melee combat is simply cooler. And even if every weapon was eventually destroyed, the Primarch's body and power armor would still be weapons in their own right, capable of overturning or throwing armored vehicles, smashing through reinforced structures, tearing apart heavy machinery, and annihilating infantry in close combat. Now let us place an average Primarch on modern Earth. They are fully equipped, but they have no legion, no warship, and no support from the Imperium. During the first few hours, governments and military forces would probably underestimate the threat. Police units, special forces, and infantry would likely be sent in first. They would have almost no realistic chance of stopping the Primarch. Their personal weapons would not be powerful enough, while the short engagement distances inside a city would allow the Primarch to close the gap extremely quickly. An infantry unit might detect the Primarch, but before it could call in heavy fire support, the target could already have broken through a wall, entered another building, or charged directly into the formation. At close range, normal human reaction speed would not be enough. A city would probably be the most favorable battlefield for a Primarch. High-rise buildings, underground tunnels, sewer systems, and dense networks of structures would allow them to avoid direct observation. Narrow streets would limit the mobility of tanks, while aircraft would struggle to use their full firepower without destroying large parts of the city and killing civilians. A Primarch would not need to follow streets, doorways, staircases, or routes already blocked by the military. They could break through walls, move through basements, and create entirely new paths. This would make surrounding them with conventional forces extremely difficult. Air forces would possess weapons powerful enough to kill a Primarch, but they would first need to locate and lock onto the target. Aircraft and missiles would be much faster than the Primarch, but they would still depend on satellites, drones, radar, thermal sensors, and targeting units on the ground. And with their intelligence, the Primarch would quickly begin to understand how those systems worked. A Primarch is not only a warrior, they are also a strategist created to command wars across entire star systems. They would soon realize that the true strength of a modern military does not lie in the soldier standing in front of them. It lies in the network behind that soldier. Command centers, radar stations, communication hubs, fuel depots, air bases, satellites, and supply systems. Instead of constantly fighting military units directly, the Primarch could begin hunting those critical links. A military base would be extremely dangerous, while the Primarch remained outside its perimeter. Artillery, missiles, and high-flying aircraft could attack from long range. However, helicopters, drones, and low-flying aircraft would remain vulnerable to the Primarch's own ranged weapons. But once the Primarch successfully entered the base, most of those advantages would disappear. Tanks could not freely fire between their own buildings. Aircraft could not bomb their own runways and command centers. Infantry would be forced to fight inside corridors, warehouses, maintenance areas, and other confined spaces where the Primarch's strength and reflexes would become overwhelming. Within a short period of time, the Primarch could destroy communication systems, kill commanders, ignite fuel storage, damage runways, and disable vehicles. A base might contain thousands of soldiers and extremely powerful weapons, but those numbers would mean far less if the weapons could not be used at the right time. The best opportunity for the militaries of Earth would be to force the Primarch into wide open terrain. There, drones, helicopters, aircraft, artillery, and missiles could track and attack the target simultaneously from several directions. A Primarch's superhuman reflexes could allow them to evade numerous direct attacks, especially individual missiles or precision-guided weapons approaching from a predictable direction. Even when the volume of fire became too dense to avoid completely, they could still identify and evade the most dangerous incoming strikes while relying on their energy field and armor to absorb the less dangerous ones. The energy field could absorb or deflect the first heavy impacts, while the armor underneath could survive damage powerful enough to destroy modern armored vehicles. Only sustained saturation attacks, overlapping explosions, and repeated heavy strikes arriving from multiple directions would have a realistic chance of overwhelming the field, breaking through the armor and finally reaching the Primarch's body. The problem is that most Primarchs would be intelligent enough to understand how dangerous open terrain was. They would not simply walk into a killing zone because the military wanted them to. To force them out of a city or forest, human forces would need to cut off escape routes, use deception, or create a situation that forced the Primarch to reveal themselves. That would be extremely difficult against an opponent with a processing speed and strategic mind far beyond those of an ordinary human. A Primarch would not need to take part in every battle. They would only need to choose weaker targets, attack them, and leave before heavier forces arrived. After every engagement, the military would have to repair bases, replace vehicles, rebuild communication systems, and reorganize its defenses. Meanwhile, the Primarch would remain a single, highly mobile target capable of changing direction at any moment. This conflict would not end in a few days. It could continue for months or even years, forcing different countries to share satellites, intelligence, technology, and military resources. Humanity would also adapt. Scientists would study data collected from every encounter, examine how the energy field reacted, analyze the armor, and identify potential weak points. Military forces would develop specialized tactics using layered sensors, decoys, automated weapons, and concentrated firepower rather than relying only on the reactions of individual soldiers. Despite being able to win almost every small-scale engagement, a Primarch would still struggle to truly conquer the entire Earth. They could devastate cities, destroy military bases, and kill enormous numbers of soldiers. But one individual could not simultaneously occupy thousands of cities, control billions of people, and destroy an industrial system spread across the entire planet. Even if a national capital was destroyed, the government could move elsewhere. If one military base was eliminated, others would continue operating. If one country suffered catastrophic losses, the remaining nations could provide additional troops and resources. Modern Earth is simply too large, too decentralized, and too productive to be completely controlled by a single individual. A Primarch could win many battles, but they could not be everywhere at once. Nuclear weapons could be considered the final option, but even then, killing a Primarch would not be simple. If they detected the preparations in advance, they could leave the area or take shelter inside a deep underground structure. If they were not caught within the direct destruction zone, their energy field, armor, and superhuman body might allow them to survive. However, if an average Primarch were trapped inside the fireball of a powerful nuclear explosion, they could still be killed. Speed and reflexes would only help them avoid the attack before the detonation. They would not allow the Primarchs to outrun the light, heat, and shockwave after the weapon exploded. The radioactive environment left behind would be far less dangerous to a Primarch than it would be to an ordinary human. Primarch biology possesses extraordinary resistance to radiation, toxins, and environmental hazards, especially when supported by power armor. Therefore, the problem is not that Earth lacks weapons powerful enough to kill a Primarch. The problem is locating them, trapping them, and successfully hitting them with those weapons. A Primarch could not conquer all of human civilization or force the entire planet to surrender through brute force alone. Earth has too many people, too much industry, too much scientific knowledge, and too many resources to be permanently controlled by one individual. However, the Primarch could destroy bases, cripple infrastructure, attack cities, and disappear before heavy firepower arrived. The conflict could continue for years, forcing multiple nations to cooperate just to track them and create one opportunity to trap them in a favorable location. The most reasonable conclusion is that a Primarch could not completely subjugate Earth, but Earth might still have to sacrifice countless lives and enormous resources to eliminate that single individual. But most of a Primarch's true value lies in their mind, not only in their physical power. A rational Primarch would eventually understand that they could not conquer an entire planet alone. At the same time, the governments of Earth would realize that continuing the war might cost far more than accepting the Primarch's presence. At that point, negotiation could become the most realistic outcome. The Primarch might agree to end their attacks and remain within an agreed territory. In return, humanity could provide food, materials, information, and assistance with maintaining their equipment. The exact agreement would depend heavily on which Primarch appeared. Some could cooperate with humanity, while others might be too unstable or violent for any lasting peace. But for a rational Primarch, the most likely ending would not necessarily be their death. It could be a tense ceasefire in which humanity is forced to accept the presence of a being it cannot fully control, while the Primarch accepts that even they cannot dominate an entire world alone.